So, welcome everyone. This is Lisa Edinburgh, Chair of the Westborough School Committee. Today is Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. This meeting of the Westborough School Committee is called to order. Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'd like to notify everyone in the room with us tonight that this meeting is being recorded by Westborough TV. School committee meetings are available for remote viewing or listening on Westborough TV's government channels, Verizon 28 and Charter 192, and online on the Westborough TV YouTube channel. Thank you to Westborough TV for covering the broadcast this evening. We have with us tonight Superintendent Amber Bach, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Daniel Mayer, Director of Finance and Administration David Gordon, Vice Chair of the Westborough School Committee Steve Durrett, School Committee members Stephen Batchelor, Raghu Nandan, and Kristen Vincent. Student Representative Andrew Chen should be here shortly, and Recording Secretary Jen Benton, and we have staff from Westborough TV here, and thank you for broadcasting. Our agenda for this evening is as follows. We'll begin with an approval of amended minutes from March 16th regular session and March 19th regular session. Then hear from Amber Bach with the superintendent's report, followed by the assistant superintendent's report, then the director of finance and administration's report, and then we'll hit you up with the school committee member reports, followed by the building project updates. Then we'll hopefully hear from some citizens during citizens' requests, and followed by a special guest, our town moderator, John Arnold, where he will debrief the school committee about our recent town meeting. Then we'll receive a report about stipends, and Amber will walk us through this, yes, she will, and then soon thereafter, we'll revisit our subcommittee and negotiation contract assignments. And then we'll adjourn for this evening with no need for an executive session. So we'll begin with an approval of the amended minutes. Do I hear a motion for the March 16th regular session?
So move.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? I will add that under school committee reports and Ms. Edinburgh, the last three words, rather than the Fales School Council, it should read SEL Parent Council. And all in favor?
Aye.
And that's a vote of 5 in favor, 0 opposed, 5 being present. We'll continue with approval of the March 19th regular session. Do I have a motion?
So move.
We have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? See a vote of 5-0, 5 being present, 5 in favor. Now we'll go right to Amber with the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. It's nice to see everybody post-town meeting. I know that we're going to talk about it, which will be a good debrief. I just want to thank everybody for just the organization, the time, the energy, and the commitment that goes into that work. And I thought it was a long but productive and meaningful town meeting, and I want to thank everybody for attending and participating. And then I know that we'll talk further about that in a bit. After town meeting, one of the things that we'd move into is looking at past warrant articles, things that not passed, but ones that have passed and that now need to be tackled in terms of organization, assignment of management, and drawing of funds. And so David and I met, and he will take point on meeting with Buildings and Grounds, and he might talk a little bit about that. They'll look at the HVAC article, the chiller article, and the freezer article, and start to make plans for organization of getting those accomplished. I'm taking point on the playground, and I'm actually going to talk about that next. And we just want to make sure we have kind of a process for who's on point. And I think that's something where it just ensures that, one, we can move quickly and efficiently and get things accomplished. We will still be waiting, and Dave's looking on taking next steps with the ARPA funding, which again is going to be the essential next piece for us to delineate the funding. We don't need to wait on moving forward on those, so we need to organize for kind of digging in and getting going on those, and then we'll delineate next steps with the funding. So the piece that we wanted to get moving on right away in terms of impact for potential installation and planning was we did a walk down yesterday morning of the Armstrong playground site, and I gave you guys a photo just if you want to look around. You can see, as we talked about, it's a confined site. The edging you can see really cuts off extended play area and the natural flow of students being able to kind of run in and out of those areas. And so we basically did a walk down and started to look at what potentials we have for expanding some play space, and then what it was going to take to get the site work and the grade taken care of. So first steps, we met with an engineer who was able to come in and look at giving us a picture of the slope of that site, and he's now going to start to take some measurements and start to look at some potential approaches to manage that grade. And then the other piece of that was we started looking at a new assessment of the two major pieces of playground equipment, and it looks like one of them will need to be pulled and will not be viable, and the other one is. And we also began an early discussion during this brainstorming meeting of potentially relocating the play equipment and maybe leveraging it onto the blacktop area, which would then change the dynamic of what we could do with kind of reconfiguring the space. So in terms of a first pass discussion and what needs to happen preliminarily is just kind of that dynamic brainstorming and getting people in alignment to do the first assessments, and we were able to accomplish that in a working meeting. I'll keep Steve, closer on it around the design and engineering discussion, and Dave will start managing the money in terms of next steps. I think we're targeting the potential of an August completion, which is very good news. We'll see what ordering, there's definitely supply chain stuff that will hit us on certain pieces, but we'll go ahead and get moving on it right away. So those are the important updates for tonight, and I'll turn it over to Daniel.
I guess a couple of updates that I'd give you would be one being the MCAS. We're in MCAS season, so that started the high school last week. They're doing what we call infrastructure trials, which is everything's online at this point to make sure that we're ready to go next week at Gibbons. Then we're going to have all our students doing MCAS over the next several weeks. So it's been a couple of years since we've done a regular MCAS. Last year we had the abbreviated MCAS, that was, and then the year before they canceled MCAS. So this will be the first year that we'll get data from, in a standardized form come the fall. So that'll be good data to have to just see how the kids are doing on those tests. The other piece of information, I don't know, the school committee knows about Maeve's retirement or not. I'm not sure. Do you know that Maeve is going to retire at the end of this year? She's announced her retirement as the head of the ELL program. So we're in the middle of doing a search for her replacement. And we're also in the midst of doing, Doreen Reeb is retiring in her HR position as HR assistant in central office. So we're in the middle of doing that. So the two important searches that are in process over the next couple of weeks. That's all.
Dave, do you have something for us this evening?
Sure. Just a brief update, just to follow up on some of Amber's comments. We are essentially, very pleased of the events at town meeting. I will be working with the facilities team to not only review the warrants, but to kind of really map a historical process from the Hastings HVAC and some of the other moves, the chillers and things like that, to ensure we have an accurate map of what took place and potential any additional aspects or things we need to consider going into the future, making sure those articles can get used appropriately. Related to ARPA, we had our initial ARPA meeting this week. It was myself and essentially all the department heads, police, fire, DPW, in the town side, and met with the consultants that basically set up our registration to kind of go into the ARPA portal, review our submission, and essentially basically what you do is once you review it, you submit it, and that basically starts the workflow. So as of now, that'll happen. I'm going to work with one of their IT people tomorrow to ensure the process is being done appropriately. And then once we kick that off by Friday, it's just in the cycle and starts getting work done on their side. So I'll keep you abreast of anything that comes up from there. That's it.
Great.
Just to add to that, with the HVAC assessment of just kind of the overall arc of projects that have been done at Hastings and then how this next funding kind of fits into process, we are doing a walk down tomorrow of Hastings looking at the report on ADA compliance and what the fixes would need to look like. So that's an important meeting as well. And I think, Steve, you are able to come, right? Yeah, so we're going to do that walk down and then get a sense of scope for what would have to be accomplished with ADA work before we could then come into the building and start the HVAC. So that's going to be, it is complex, which is why Dave wants to get a delineation of kind of all of the historical perspectives into one memo so that we can kind of keep everybody on the same page, not just with the money, but with process. And then once he scopes that out with regard to money and process, Steve and I can add historical data and kind of give ourselves an archive document to work off of.
Okay. Andrew, ready for your report?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so a lot of big events over the past 2 weeks. The biggest probably is the spring dance last Friday. There was a huge turnout. It was a great time. And thank you, Mr. Callahan, for posting a total of 5 times on Twitter that night. That was amazing. So Student Council is also working on getting a Holocaust survivor speaker to come in and speak at the high school. And they're also working on a student-teacher basketball tournament during the week of April 11th, as well as a bingo night. And this is to raise money for a student who has family in Ukraine. So there's that. And for the NHS Induction Ceremony will be next Monday at 6 o'clock. I've invited Mrs. Bach to come, and
I'll be there.
Which is a great thing since it's actually like in person and like normal this year, because last year it had to be out on the turf and it was super windy and stuff. So looking forward to that. The spring week of service will also be the week of 9th to 16th. And a lot of volunteers helping out for that with the Earth Day cleanup, clothing sorting for clothing drive, a lot of things, and babysitting during the town meeting. That went really well. Everybody got their kids back safe, and that was nice. And also simultaneously at the exact same time during the town meeting, congratulations to the Science Olympiad team for placing 10th at state. That was a good job to them. Fails are running a fun run pep rally. That was this morning. And they will also, tonight, they're also doing a fun run open house. And this will all culminate into the fun run, which will be, I believe, next Friday. There'll be a lot of fun activities and things. And it's a great bonding event for the community, for students and parents alike. And that's all I have to report for today.
Okay, thank you.
Gets busy in the spring, doesn't it?
Yes.
Steve, Bachelor, do you have any reports for tonight?
Just one report that on,
Your microphone.
just one item to report. On April 16th at Hastings Elementary School, the Westborough CPAC, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, is putting on, in collaboration with the Westborough Police and Fire Departments, a sensory-friendly public safety day where families can come and kids can come and touch the fire trucks, the police cruisers, and sort of explore in a sensory-friendly environment. The Yeoman's ice cream truck will be there. We'll have fidgets, have some tables set up. So we're looking for a really fun time there that will speak to issues of public safety, will be a great way for families to meet one another, and in sort of a quiet and calm environment. So I hope to see people there. Thank you.
I pushed out a notification on that. I forget, what's the time?
It's from 11 to 1. Thank you. Yeah, 11 to 1, Hastings.
And for students who get anxious at seeing uniforms or large vehicles, they probably won't run the lights or the sirens, and so they give students a chance to kind of like work at their own level of comfort. And so the officers and fire department really enjoy it. So it's a fun event. So I'll see you there.
That's great. And Kristen?
Yep, I don't have anything to report tonight, thank you.
You? Raghu?
I don't have anything to report tonight, thanks.
Steve, you want us to wait until the building report?
Yes.
Okay. So I just have a few things. I wanted to thank the Westborough Fire and Police Department and the neighboring towns that joined in a search a couple days ago, or was it yesterday? My understanding is there were several dozen emergency personnel searching, and we really appreciate it. And I also wanted to thank the many citizens who got into their cars and were in that search as well, because I saw you and I realized instantly we were on the same mission. And I just sincerely appreciate the town we live in that would be able to do that in unison. So thank you. I also wanted to mention that on April 30th, which seems very far away, but it's a Saturday, and there is an energy fair at the Mill Pond School sponsored by Sustainable Westborough and the Rotary Club, and there will be presentations and exhibitors. And then I also wanted to remind everyone to check their email. It's time to recognize and celebrate our Westborough educators and staff by growing a gratitude garden of pinwheels at each of our schools. You can make a donation to the Westborough Education Foundation to purchase a pinwheel that will be planted in honor of your chosen educator or staff member during Teacher Appreciation Week in May. And all proceeds benefit innovative grants and academic programming in the Westborough Public Schools. These are grants that are funded by Westborough Education Foundation. They are not funded by the school system. They are separate. So as you remember the pinwheels from last year, it's time to plant the garden once again. And that's all I have for this evening. So we'll move on to the building project update. Steve?
Thank you, Lisa. Well, we're in the phase now of shakedown of equipment at Fales School based on now having occupied the school since November. Certain things are not panning out as we had hoped, and therefore, because all of the equipment that's installed is under warranty, we're able to call on repair people to come and either make good on the equipment installed or replace it if necessary. In this case, we're talking about the chiller for the refrigerator is not performing as we had hoped, and people are on call to come and make the repairs necessary. In the meantime, because the temperature isn't what we had hoped, we have been removing the food that's been stored there and keeping it in a different location so that the repairs can be made. We're still working on commissioning the geothermal system, and that work continues to find out why we have certain leaks in the underground piping. The process to find those leaks will be as we move material for the backfill of the old school foundation, which gets us closer to the elevation of that piping. We'll find out what exactly is going on with those pipes. Again, all of that is under warranty, and it's not costing the town anything to find these problems and fix them. The design work on protecting the north gym door, which we talked about a couple of meetings ago in regards to water that got into the gym. That design work to fix that problem has now been complete, and the pricing for the solution is undergoing bidding right now. The design work includes a small masonry wall around that slab, replacement of the slab with a new slab that has a trench drain in it, and a small structure over the slab to make sure that, in fact, we can keep rainfall off of it. It's unfortunate that it wasn't thought of in the beginning, but again, in the process of the shakedown of various things, we find this stuff and make repairs to it. Project Phase 2, which is basically the final backfill and grading of the old school foundation, which will turn into a circular parking lot, allowing for school buses to unload on the east side of the school, has actually begun by moving some of the material I just spoke about into that foundation. Moving the balance of the material will start probably next week, weather dependent, because since the excess material needed to do this has been stored at the town's water treatment plant, and we'll begin to bring it back to the site. As we spoke about in the last meeting, the Hastings Sprinkler system final walkthrough by the fire department required us to add additional sprinkler heads at various places within the closets of the building, and so those heads have now been installed, and the final fire department walkthrough should happen soon if it hasn't already. And as mentioned earlier, the school committee articles at town meeting were voted in favor, and as you've heard from others tonight, that the effort to start that work and organize how we're going to get it started will happen quite soon. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Does anyone have any questions about the report? Okay, so we'll move on. We're up to citizens' requests. As a reminder, we have a policy regarding citizens' requests. Some important pieces of this policy include that you must be a current resident of Westborough. Speakers are allowed to address the school committee about issues within the school committee's purview. Westborough School District policy or budget. Each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak to the school committee. Written comments longer than 3 minutes may be presented to the presiding chair before or after the meeting. You are welcome to hand me additional comments in writing now or send them via email, and I will share them with the other school committee members. Public comment by residents at this meeting is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between individuals and the school committee. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. Our role is to listen carefully to what you have to share with us tonight. Clapping, cheering, calling out, or any other noise following a speaker is not allowed. Is anyone here tonight for citizens' request? Mr. Conklin, please come up. Be sure to state your name and street address and then speak into the microphone.
Boyd Conklin, 8 Water Street. The school committee chair, Lisa Edinburgh's attempt to remove Columbus Day from the town failed by 2/3 public vote at the Westborough town meeting. I request that the school committee put Columbus Day back into the Westborough schools, reversing school committee's recent removal of Columbus Day from Westborough schools. Cancel culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theories, social and emotional learning, vaccinating, all need to be thrown out the window, and if that requires not taking the bribes of the government's ESSER 1, 2, and 3 and Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security CARES Act grants, so be it. So, and this from Jared. Okay, it's really quite simple. The 3rd dose increases immunity, so after the 4th dose, you'll be protected. Once 80% of the population has received the 5th dose, the restrictions can be relaxed as the 6th dose stops the virus from spreading. I am confident that the 7th dose will solve our problems and we'll have no reason to fear the 8th dose. The clinical phase of the 9th dose will confirm.
Sorry, what does this have to do with the school committee?
The school committee is pushing vaccines by having vaccine clinics at the school.
I don't think so, sir.
It's my
I believe
opinion.
that each parent has a reason and
Exactly. But
an opportunity, just like going to the store to buy your food.
grants, the CARES grants by the federal government to the school for them to take them. Pushing vaccines is part of taking those grants. A certain amount of those funds must be used for this purpose, for this kind of purpose. And you guys can write it off that way. So, and we'll have no reason to fear the 8th dose. The clinical phase of the 9th dose will confirm that the antibodies
your
remain
Point of
information,
order,
sir.
this is irrelevant to the school committee.
So what they're saying is that this does not follow the policy of citizens' request. So what they're saying is that what you're talking about is not under the purview of the school committee, and they're requesting you to move on to a topic that is.
Well, my point here is that you guys are continuously pushing more doses. I mean, we've got the federal government now
What
has,
evidence do you have of that statement, sir?
by having vaccine clinics at
Did
Mill
we
Pond
ask
School last
anyone
month.
or make anyone get vaccinations?
I'm not talking about you forcing people to have vaccines.
Then
I'm
how
saying
can you
you're-
say that we're
you're
peddling-
enabling them to get
I'm
vaccinated?
sorry, your
Your
3
time is
minutes
up.
is up at this time, and you're welcome to email me with any other comments you have that you wanted to say.
Thanks.
You interrupted him, that you should add that to his 3 minutes.
Except the problem is, this is not a back and forth, as the policy states, but more importantly, it's not within the purview of the school committee. So we welcome citizens to come to us and express their opinions. And I think that we can all agree that thus far, we haven't mentioned it enough, even though I've reiterated it last time, I repeated it, that you need to stick to what is purview of the school committee. So you can work on that for the future. We'd love to see you again. We appreciate you coming, and we thank you. So is there anyone else here for citizens' requests? Okay, so we'll move on. Tonight, we have a special guest, our town moderator, John Arnold, debriefing us after the annual town meeting. Always a pleasure to hear feedback and offer some as well. Thank you for joining us tonight, John.
Anyway, I'm not so sure it's me debriefing you as us just having a debriefing. It's been 3 years since we've had one of these. I don't think we were able to do it the past 2 years because A, town meetings were short, and B, because of COVID, all the meetings were messed up. So first of all, for any of you who I haven't met, hi, I don't think I've met you, David. Andrew, I don't think I've met you. I know the rest of you a little bit. So I don't have any prepared remarks. I mean, we all know, we came, we saw, we had a meeting, we got home, it was late, we rested. I will thank all of you for your attention and for being there. I know it was hard, and I will make special thanks to the custodial staff for setting up the school. It's always important, and Cindy Crowley, who always helps coordinate the tables and all that. And this year, especially from the couple of comments I've heard, thanks to Amber for having the lunch in the gymnasium. I know a number of people that partake of the lunch, and they said it was good. I didn't want to leave the room unless I had to, so I brought 2 ham sandwiches and had one at lunch and one at dinner. So I think we've learned a lot. I'm going to be trying to talk to some of the other boards as I usually do. I think one of the things that I think we hadn't really thought about when last May, when we had the bylaw change to start the meeting at 9, we'd had a couple of years of meetings that had taken 3 or 4 hours, and I don't think, I went back and reviewed my notes, and I don't think anybody brought up the, hey, what are we going to do about lunch and dinner? And we took out the part of the bylaw that prescribed a 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock-ish break, and so, and the run-up to the meeting, that's when we started talking about what are we going to do, and without any prescription in bylaw, it's up to the voters. So I tried to make it clear to the voters who had approached me beforehand about the potential length of the meeting, and again, during my preamble to the meeting, that it's the voters' meeting, and if voters wanted to take breaks, they were willing to make a motion. And I think myself, as well as the select board and any of you who talk to people, if we think there's a better plan, and we can sort of set expectations. I mean, I view it as it's the voters' meeting. As I said, I was willing to stay there as long as it took, and I was willing to break if that's what the voters wanted to do. At the end of the day, I think there were a number of trade-offs about relief that we got through the warrant, and then weariness that it took till 12:35 or so to actually do it. So you know, it's a learning exercise. This was our first real full warrant starting at 9 o'clock, and I think we'll all learn from that. So I'm certainly gathering feedback about how to do things better and more effectively and more efficiently. But as we know, especially in an open town meeting, the whole benefit of open town meeting is for voters to come and speak their piece, as long as, you know, it stays on topic and within a reasonable amount of time. And I think it went okay. There were places that could have gone better and could have gone differently. But for any students or parents watching tonight, I'll say, if you ever want to see an exercise in real time, that preparation is everything. If I hadn't spent a lot of time working with people on various boards, committees, citizens, petitioners, and going through my town meeting time and playing out what will I do if this happens and what will I do if this happens, it would have taken much longer, and I think it would have appeared more chaotic. So to me, it was a testament of preparation and studying. It was, I felt that everyone who was there was prepared, and then it was just a matter of seeing how the process played out. So
Okay.
I didn't have any prepared remarks, but apparently I managed to talk for 5 minutes or so. And I'll gladly listen to, I'll gladly listen to any feedback, comments, or things you think that either me specifically or us as a community should think about going into next time.
Well, we want to thank you for your dedication to the town. Some may not realize that the town moderator is an elected position and that our town has voted upon, which is great. Congratulations. The position requires an individual to know process and procedures from Mass General laws and institute these to the best of his ability. It additionally requires one to circumvent issues and what-if scenarios, researching judiciously to understand the parameters of articles brought before the town in the warrant, as you mentioned. So I want to open it up to discussion from the committee. Does anyone have some feedback for John about town meeting?
Yeah. Thank you. It was a well-run meeting, and I think your observations about the past couple meetings, I agree with, because they were short, they were to the point, we didn't have a lot of people there. It was a COVID, meeting, so it was unusual that we were spread out in the gymnasium, being back in the auditorium, and seeing a lot of people engaging in town meeting was great. And I think part of that also is a lot of new people coming to town meeting and requiring a lot of education about what is town meeting. And I know you always do a great job, at the start of a meeting to explain, but it just made me think that maybe even before our next town meeting, doing a lot of that education before anyone even gets to town meeting might be helpful for us to kind of, let everyone in Westborough know, if you're new to this type of engagement, this is how it goes.
I did want to share that actually in the midst of the town meeting, Maureen Amyot, the library director, had sent me an email that I didn't see until the next day that said, it might be a good idea to have a library information session that's sort of like a primer on town financing and things like that. And I said, maybe we should do a series because, I've done discussions with people about overview of town meeting and how it all works.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping to set something up. We're hoping that people will attend and maybe try one over the summer, or maybe in the September or October run up to the town meeting. Because as I tell people who ask me, it used to be back in the good old days of when I was younger, everybody who lived in a town like Westborough grew up with town meeting and everyone knew what it was. But now with all the transitory nature of people, there's people who come to a town who don't really know what it's about. And even my own kids didn't really understand until they watched me do it for a few years when they were in high school. So yeah, I think outreach is an important part of my job. I mean, I'm sort of the figurehead of the legislative body as well as the parliamentarian, but I consider that outreach, and I've I was contacted by Westborough Connects, and they're going to contact me back, and we're going to try to do something through that. And I'll do my, it used to be annual, but it's been 3 years. I'll let Dan and Amber know that if any teacher ever wants me to come in and do any sort of outreach just to kids. I used to do it as part of my Dr. Seuss reading day back when I had time to do that, and hope to start it again. Because I think just getting kids young to say, put on your calendar on your 18th birthday, wherever you're living, head to town or city hall and register to vote.
Yep.
You can't start telling kids that soon enough, and I think kids feel empowered by realizing that they are the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and getting them excited to think about that is a cool part of growing up in America.
Again, I think, certainly, I don't want to speak for Westborough TV, but I know they'd probably be happy to film anything with you and get that as just another avenue to get it out to, everyone in town. But I think you handled the meeting well. It was so clear to me that you were very well prepared for the what ifs. And, that was great because, and I think it was a really good example of the ability of people in our town to come together and talk about something that people felt very, very strongly about in many different ways, and listening to discussion and actually watching people's minds shifting and changing and understanding all the different points of view around some of the issues that were presented. So I was glad I was there, and if anyone wants to watch it, it's on Westborough TV, so you can go back and watch
Your
it.
14-hour binge-a-thon of the town.
Exactly. I would break it up into chunks, but yep. So thank you, John.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, just a follow-up on your idea that, for kids and have some demonstrations, as we have seen on some television programs relative to mock trials. It might be interesting to have a mock town meeting for kids of, whatever age group you might choose, maybe 2 or 3 articles that might be, crafted as general interest to the kids as well as their parents. And
I'd certainly be willing to do that. In fact, Joe Harrington did one of those, I think it was probably about 11 or 12 years ago, tried one of those where they picked 1 or 2 articles, had some people be the voters, some people be proponent and opponent to do that.
Yeah,
So I'd certainly be willing to help with that.
That is obviously the best way to learn, and not only would kids learn, but it might actually help the parents as well. So, that's your dedication to the job and the excellence in the way you execute it has been one of the highlights, I think, of your career as town moderator, as well as many of the past ones that we've had as well. So thanks, John.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, I had a question. The age requirement is 18, correct?
To vote?
Yeah.
You have to be a registered voter, and currently the voting age in Massachusetts is 18.
Right. So I guess one thing that struck me is at the town meeting, as I walked through the high school, I saw a lot of banners, or not a lot, but I saw some banners about Ukraine. And I understood why they were there. I didn't see any 18-year-olds there. And so I was wondering, why aren't 18-year-olds here? Why isn't the school district doing something to promote civic engagement? Because what's going on in the town is much more important in their immediate lives. I'm not saying Ukraine isn't important, but in their immediate lives, those 37 articles are more important. So I think it's incumbent upon the school district to do that work, because some votes were outnumbered, and there are enough 18-year-olds out there. I had some conversations with high schoolers afterwards where I told them about the town meeting, and they thought a lot of nonsense went on, a lot of nonsense. And I said, you gotta show up, but they didn't know how. That's our job.
There when I was 18, but I wasn't 18 until after I graduated. So.
Andrew, do you want to comment on that since you're an 18-year-old?
I know that at the high school, there's this thing called the Local Politics Initiative. Right now, it's Sean Tam is running it. I'm sure there'll be someone else who will run it next year. If you'd like, you can reach out to them, and I'm sure they'd be happy to promote like advertising about the town meeting, especially to the seniors. So yeah, that's an idea for next
Yeah,
year.
could you have them get in touch with me, because it's easier?
Oh, yeah,
It's
definitely.
moderator@town.westborough.ma.us, or Amber can give you my email
I can-
address.
I can give
It's
it
just
to
a
you.
mouthful, just like all the ones, but I'd certainly be willing to talk with them
Okay,
and
sounds good.
figure what to do. Yeah, so thanks.
Yeah, so definitely, I think, again, another topic where we can certainly discuss it, but I think Westborough High School, and certainly, I mean, we visit lots of classrooms, Daniel could certainly talk with more specificity about this, but, you know, we do talk about civics, we talk about civic engagement. Both of my children went to town meeting, and it's a family-oriented job as well. And there was good discussion at town meeting about family and schools working together. And, you know, you educate yourself and you then educate your children. And so I believe strongly that the first group that has to be educated to come to town meeting are the adults in town. And yes, I certainly recognize the important role of civics in the work that we do. I think we raise students who are very engaged, who often go into politics and civic work and community service and are knowledgeable and understand how to look at things from a wide array of really varied perspectives and primary source work. And I feel that our, you know, social studies arm is very strong. And always looking to improve. But I think that the work, to John's point, and certainly I've talked to Christy about it, after years of people having been really stepping away from town meeting, both in combination of moving to town, transitions in town, and you don't really get a primer when you move to town on what kind of government is here and what your job is, and you get more information on how to deliver your trash than you do how to participate in town meetings. So the onus is on all of us as an organization and as a community. I certainly, as an educator, see that branch of our work. It's a little out of our lane, but I consider it also in our lane as members of the community. So I have talked to Karen at Westborough TV, and I've talked to Christy and to the couple select board members about working with John to do an educational series, and providing communication to people when they enter the town. The clerk's office could put out information on town meeting on their desks and welcome new families that register, as, you know, we can put it out with our realtors and other people in the community. Say, welcome to Westborough, here's the kinds of things that you can participate in. So I think the onus is on us as an educational community, and certainly the arm of educating our kids as well. I don't negate that, but we always ask our kids to step up. Like, I feel like we have to ask our adults to step up. So that's my 2 cents on it. With regard to the meeting, John, I thought that the working lunch was good, because if you had taken a lunch and a dinner break, I would have been concerned about our timing. And I think that over time, you could build a culture with people understanding that there's food available. And I think if we certainly be willing to host that design next year and, you know, continue to promote it. And I think that the babysitting was much more robust, and that was very helpful for people
Yeah, I didn't even know
as
there
well.
was babysitting, or I would have announced it. I didn't know.
Yeah,
So that's one thing I
yeah.
didn't even know about till tonight. And I heard, I said, oh, there was
so
babysitting. And I
we
was so
pushed
busy,
it
I
out
didn't see
in
it. So.
announcements, and we try
good,
to make sure
okay.
we let people know. And then I think the preparation was evident, and I think the votes that you allowed to guide what people decided who were sitting there made sense, whether or not we continued, and we did opt to continue, and it was worth soldiering through because people voted to continue. And I thought that voting the dinner break was the appropriate way to decide if people wanted to act for a break. So those are my sense as a voter, you know, and I thought the dynamic of discussion and the participation and your management of all of it was really good to see.
So I was just really grateful that your ability to educate the town with so many new attendees that come yearly, you created a real mix of the knowing and the unknowing participants, you know, really educating everyone. There's always a cast of characters that show up, you know, showing a simmering group of passionate, earnest citizens, which you manage very, very well. And so I appreciate that you create this sort of precedence for establishing, you know, matching time for the pro versus the opponent of an article. I think that's a challenging process, and I see you doing it really well. I think if there was one critique, it would be to limit it to 2.5 minutes of debate per person, meaning, and I also recognized pretty early that you were keeping precedence to the fact that you gave more time earlier in the town meeting at articles per person, that you weren't about to switch it back to 2.5 minutes. At least that's what I thought was going on.
Yeah, I mean, as you could tell, there was a lot I had to keep track of,
Yeah.
and I do put, I have my phone there, I'm using it in stopwatch mode, and I realized that there were enough new people that I were letting some people go long, and sometimes I was busy keeping notes, and I lost it. So one person made a suggestion I'm going to look into is, could we come up with some sort of, green, yellow, red light that that essentially I start it, and then people can see when it goes down. I have no idea how much those cost, and I'm going to ask other moderators about that. But I did try to, as the ebb and flow of the meeting happened, I tried to at least keep it fair and not suddenly make it appear that I was tightening the rules for one article and not for the other. And I realized that, we had people there who'd never been there and who maybe didn't know about and not everybody's there when I say 2.5 minutes.
Right.
And so I try to manage it a little bit. And
Well, overall, I thought it was a great town meeting. It was long, but I also think that the vote for the 9 a.m. possibly had something to do with the fact that we were in a hot gym, meaning that in the last 2 town meetings, one was an oven gym, and the other one was not so difficult, but you felt a sense of going from 9 to, I think it was 4.
one year, I think, went till like 1:30 or 2,
1:30,
and the other
right,
year went
right,
till
right.
4 when we did
What?
the annual
Yeah.
town meetings. So the last year's October special town meeting
The 9 to 1.
in the auditorium was more normal, but it was a relatively short warrant.
So
But
people
yes, the previous
perceived-
2 years at 9 o'clock, it was an abridged warrant because the select board was trying to make it, because they knew people were hesitant to sit in a closed space for too long, because the first one was pre-vaccine, the second one was vaccines had just come out, but it was only people like 70 or over or whatever, so.
So, people make decisions based on what's happening at the time that they're, so I can see how it
Lots
could
to learn.
happen that way. And, were people thinking about lunch and dinner at that point?
I had nothing in
No.
my notes that said
I don't
anybody
think
said, what are we going to do?
Anyone said
So-
a word. I was there. I don't remember anything of that sort. So, and, the other thing about young people, there have been young people who've come to the town meetings in the past. And, I just want to comment that one of the things we always get from feedback from parents is, why is it on a Saturday? And of course, if it was on a Monday night, people would say, why is it on a Monday night? Because there's no good time for everyone to come to a town meeting. And so it happens to be Saturday. And, I could hear many more complaints if it were Sunday, and I could hear many more complaints if it was the middle of the week. So that's why it's Saturday, because
And it's-
you hear the buzz that could be
For
something
everyone who
else.
pays
So-
attention, it's the will of the voters. That bylaw was not enacted by any one or two of us. It was a vote of a town meeting that said that, so. And the select board has some discretion, so if people really care, they're the ones who call the time and place.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I apologize.
That's all right.
I
No worries.
you were supposed to be-
No worries.
That's okay. He's the guy I keep forgetting he's on the school committee because he's sitting sort of close to him, and so my apologies for not
That's
immediately
no problem,
recognizing.
John. Job well done. I see these meetings go longer and longer every year. So there was a couple of things that I observed. The finance committee recommendations. It's there in the book. It's every warrant article said the finance committee stands. This is the stand of the finance committee, and yet they came to the floor. I think that's a repeat of what it was.
Do you mean the fact that they're reiterating, or do you mean
Yeah,
people who voted the other
reiterating
way?
where the
Yeah.
finance committee
Yeah.
stands. And
Okay,
doing the-
that's a delicate balance, and I'll
Yeah.
give you, I don't want to take a lot of time, but the backstory of that is, first of all, the hardest part of my job is actually getting 9 people to be on the finance committee, because they meet a
Yeah.
lot. They don't,
Yeah, yeah.
And so what happened is that during COVID times, and a little before, as you say, their recommendation is there. They've met like 30 times.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't acknowledge them. And people walk away saying, what do they do? And you try to talk to people to get them interested, and they go, what do they do? They print a number, and then they don't say anything. And so, and if you, admittedly, it's a lot, but the past 2 annual town meetings, the message to voters in the booklet has gotten into some pretty, meaty subjects about the fact that the town has some tough decisions, and so they try to make it that they don't talk about every article, but if there's one that's important, I give them their couple of minutes too. So, but it's a trade-off, and I recognize that it shouldn't be
trying to make it more concise and precise and make it. So that's one observation I had. I'm like, I get it. Well, whenever they made the presentation, I would look at the book, and this is exactly what they're saying. So the presentations sometimes also went longer than 9 minutes, is it?
10 minutes,
10 minutes,
but because of some logistic things in a couple of places where I lost time, they ran a little long, but I gave both sides the ability to go the same. Again, it was the same thing of occasionally, as I'm furiously trying to figure out what to do and taking notes, I lose track of time. So I tried to be fair, but I've taken note of the fact that people seem to think that the 2.5 minutes is fair and the 10 minutes is fair. I'm going to try to be a little more strict about that.
Other than that, it was job well done. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm trying. The other, I don't want to take any time, but I'll also mention Steve's mention about the students. I'll also remind the students they can come to these meetings too. Not that you'll appreciate that, but I mean, back in the day before there was a student representative.
They send a rotation of kids, so they do come.
I started coming to school committee meetings back when I was like a sophomore because there were a couple of things I wanted to change about the school. And of course, my mother and father were terrified. But I can't emphasize enough to grown-ups as well as students. The message at town meeting about if you want to affect change, the earlier you get involved in the process could not be more true. Because after you've been through hops, skips, and jumps of committees, a lot of the questions have been asked and a lot of things have been done, but if you want to affect change, the sooner you get involved, the easier it is to be a participant in the discussions, and also to deeply understand, have compromises been made along the way, and what were the give and takes then? So, that's my lesson of my life from everyone, is that preparation and doing that. Oh, okay. So
high schoolers,
I knew I should have left when I was ahead.
I have a senior. If she sees the agenda 9 to 9, she's not going to show up. You need to somehow make it palatable for these kids.
Well, I understand. Yes, I mean, being our own legislative body is a tricky business, and we don't want to meet weekly, and we don't want,
I'm thinking practically.
It's about finding creative ways to incentivize people
need to find some way
to participate in the decisions that affect their lives. And so, if the rhetoric alone doesn't do it, then, some sort of material reward, whatever it takes to get people involved.
And not that it's an excuse, but back in the 60s and 70s, town meeting would start on Saturday, it would go till Monday, it would go to Tuesday, it would go to Wednesday. There were a couple of years, I think it went till Thursday before it was done. So, not that it's an excuse.
And I don't know if people remember, but John also used to do info sessions. There were information sessions.
I just ran out of time. Yeah, I ran out of time this year because I was busy preparing with other people. So I'm going to try to bring those back too. Essentially, what I've tried to do is a week or two before town meeting, have a couple of drop-in office hour type things where people who, where I don't take positions on the articles, but I can explain what I know about. Here's what I know about what I've heard, and here's the proponent if you want to go get more information, so people can pre-ask questions and get some of their questions out of the way before the meeting.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it
Thanks.
very much.
See you next time.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
So we'll move on to our stipend report. Amber, you want to take us through that?
I do. Thank you. So this is one of 2 reports you'll receive. This is one we added where what we wanted to do was to provide a summation for you. After we had, during COVID, we modified we had many of our activities that were unable to run. We had shortened sports seasons, like over the past 2 years, the end of the spring sports season of year 1920 and then 2021 impacted. This year, we went back then to typical fee, typical implementation, and have had a much more normal year this year, certainly with the fall being somewhat delayed, but now, as you can hear by Andrew's report, a more normal kind of robust set of things taking place. At that time, we also then made a proposal that had been coming up in discussion within the Stipend Committee, and we saw it as an opportunity coming off of COVID with the modifications of funding and then also the questions. We had proposed not having, and we ran this year, which is not having the clubs need to pilot for 2 years without being paid at all. So structurally, driven by contract and the organization of the stipend contract design, people that run a club and host it as the advisor are unpaid for 2 years. They need to collect data. They need to see what the robust structure of the club or activity is, how much it meets, what the requirements are, and then they send that data to the stipend committee, and we look at it and we place them into the salary payment grid. So yet annually, because clubs are very flexible, as are some of our intramurals and other sports, we had people running clubs that might only run for 1 year, but it's an authentic club experience, and it might only have a duration of 1 year or 2 years, and then it might rotate out. And so the proposal was to pay $500 to a base pilot year, and that for those 2 years when you were piloting, we would pay you $500 as a base for collecting the data, running the club, starting the organization, and serving as advisor, and then we would take the 2 years of data and then assess and place you into the grid. So this report kind of did two things. It was to summarize for you what I think the recommendations are coming off of that pilot, and then to also provide for you a snapshot on how we manage the finances of stipends so that we could make a smart financial decision, which is, can we handle that? Which is, if we had 25 clubs run, it would be $14,000 a year generally to have, and could we carry that? While we also then were looking to increase, making sure that we were covering more of the general support activities for some of the clubs. So when you join a sport or a fine arts activity, you might have some additional payments like your spirit wear and different things, or if you go to a special trip, you're paying additional money. But in general, when you join a sport, your uniform is covered, the enrollments for things, the participation, the bus, everything. And we wanted to make sure that we got our clubs to a parallel place. And we've done that over the last year, so we kind of track the finances of that and say, that's manageable within the bus allotment that we have set aside. It's manageable within being able to absorb in the student fee activity account to cover those costs. So my goal in this report was to then summarize for you. I'm not going to reread it for you. I think it's self-explanatory, but I will skim you through it. So starting at the top, I just indicate what I just summarized to you. And Daniel, if you skim down, I was asking to weigh the criteria. All these programs are paid basically out of two key things, the student activity account and budget money. I then provided for you the past ways that we've had the fees and what we've done, and then the financial background on this to show you that basically we carry in budget an arm of the salary amounts, which is the process, like we say, when we place you into the grid and you vote that, it flows then into either payment through the stipend revolving account, or we indicate that we're going to push it into the budget. So currently, if you leave it there for a sec, Daniel, I think there's 237, stipends managed out of these two accounts. So you can see there, David set up for you the financial plan for FY23, which carries the amount that will cover intramurals, activity advisors, coaches, athletics, and clubs, bringing you to that total. And if you scroll down further, you'll see then that the portion carried structurally automatically by the student activity account are the 15 assistant coaches and the trainer, which we want to support the end of this year and then into next year. You can see then that typically we articulate then out of the student activity account, we pay for equipment, uniforms, large events, athletic equipment, and a range of costs. Currently, for example, I'm just throwing an example for you, which you'll see down below. The athletic director is getting a cost for repairing the tennis courts. They really took a hard hit over the winter, and they have some substantial cracks in them. So she's developing the estimate right now. We would look to get those done this summer, and that would come out of student activity accounts in support of our amazing tennis teams, and get those courts, make sure they remain playable. Also, our tennis courts are probably the #1 actively used resource in the town. Our kids are fighting for court space usually on the weekends and even at the end of the day. They're busy all the time. It's impressive. If you'll scroll down a little bit further, you'll see then that the other kind of analysis I wanted to provide for you was a snapshot of expenditures. And then Dave and I will spend a little time on this and can answer questions for you. So we showed you in general kind of the original range of the activity account. Like it can vary. You can see that the balance is in there. And then you can see a range of the amounts transferred out in certain years. And some of those, and we can talk more about this, I wanted to reflect to you some general entry and exit numbers on those accounts, on that account annually, year over year. And then at the bottom, you see currently that it's carrying the 400,000. That's about where we would hope to find it, given that, again, we'll take several expenditures out of it between now and the end of the year to cover costs. And then if you look down below, he tried to kind of categorize some general expenditures for you of those that come out of the line item directly. We have some other larger transfers where you transfer out of the account and move it to another account, and that's expense 6 as an example over there. Some of those, if you see like the athletic stadium, the fine arts risers, the tennis courts, a big piece of football equipment so if you look at the end there, it says expense type 6. That's an example of large expenditures where we might plan for a couple years to do that expenditure. Those aren't usually emergency expenditures. And we transfer funds out of this account and they go over into another account. I didn't ask Dave to go down into that kind of granular level of reporting over past years. Certainly we could, but we'd have to trace backwards the expenditures. So I wanted to give you kind of a snapshot. So you can see transfer out that he knew came directly out of the account in those years for like buses, uniforms, club support. Those come right out of the student activity account. But there are additional transfers that come out that would like there would be bigger expense hits in that main column if I reflected those in this particular snapshot. I didn't, just because I didn't push them back to kind of go back that far. I mean, but like, for example, I know we spent money on the risers, fine arts. We spent probably $250,000 out of athletics for the stadium renovation. And then, as I said, we've done the tennis courts twice. So those are the types of expenditures that are supported by the Student Activity Fund, as well as some larger replacement equipment for the training room. And when we redid the floor, because it flooded in there and it was covered by insurance, we took the opportunity to replace some equipment. Those are large transfers that kind of come out of that account. Should we want to go back and do a more granular assessment, we can. I mean, it's all part of the tracking of approvals that we do as kind of an annual year to year in the work we're doing. So I think the important summary of that is the functionality of the student activity account allows us to provide a very robust experience for our students across district, to both keep them in good uniforms, to make sure that they're having a sound playing or singing experience or club experience, and that the activities in general are paid for. Much like our our athletics or our fine arts vary. Like hockey's very expensive, football's very expensive, soccer's not. Like, different expenses pull. Like robotics is an expensive club, and we need to be providing more of the financial coverage for the cost of their supplies. They also do fundraising. So those are the types of things where the account allows us to be responsive to the things going on with students and support the development of their clubs and experiences. And we can talk about this in a minute. I'm going to scroll you down a little bit. So the summary of the pilot, again, to give you a snapshot, we had $7,000 worth of clubs run, 10 in year 1 and 2 in year 4. And if you scroll down, you can see that those were the club experiences that were run this year. Now, some of those fall below thresholds, so they wouldn't be paid at all. And they still have to move through the 2-year cycle of experience, but they're paid the base $500 experience and for these experiences that they provided, which I think is appropriate. And then why I'm recommending we continue the practice, while we also have clear standards and we track, the enrollments and the data. And then they have an opportunity after the end of year 2 to rotate in and ask to be placed into the salary grid. That's the report that I would bring you in May. I would bring you the report, and we annually meet in April, usually before April break, and then that comes to you in the early May report, the recommendation for what clubs of these would rotate into the grid and be placed appropriately based upon, you can see the range of the experiences are very different. You might have a big group that doesn't meet very often. You might have a small group that meets all the time and on the weekends. So the grid, it takes a kind of a matrix of kind of, different pieces and then has a composite set of decisions that the stipend committee makes around comparable fee, basically. If you scroll down a little bit further, you see those are the year 2 clubs that we'll be discussing. And there might be, sometimes there's others that come forward and they'll be part of the stipend process. And then we would be returning with that particular assessment. You would see those clubs and a proposal for where they would fall into the salary grid in terms of moving beyond the 500. And if you rotate down a little further, I would recommend that clearly, I think the student activity account can manage the $500 coverage of the experience for the advisor and the additional coverage of some types of expenditures that in past kids might have been collecting $10 to get a bus, like all those, like we evened that out, and we'll work with doing a presentation to advisors to make sure they know that, if your t-shirt is your club uniform for robotics, we'll pay for it. If it's a spirit wear thing and you're buying 5 pairs of sweats, you pay for those and we pay for your uniform. So a little bit more standardization, and that will come through just the club management piece. And then the second recommendation that we generally make, and I usually bring this before you for a vote, is what we charge annually for the student activity fees. So I am after looking at the costs, and I think my goal here is to charge the appropriate amount for participation such that we can provide this robust coverage and achieve the things that we achieve utilizing these 2 accounts, while we also keep it cost effective. So there's a $600 cap. Most of our families tap the cap. You might have a couple kids, they're participating in a couple things. Most families annually, if they have if your kid's doing a lot and you've got a couple, you're gonna pay that $600 annually as your family cap. And then there's a sliding scale of financial support as needed, if not a totally mitigated fee or a partial fee. That's done privately, working from the building level with the school administrators and administrative assistants, as well as the financial office. I also do superintendent's privilege, and I look at those rotational fees and negate them if needed. So my recommendation would be that we maintain, now there was a differential between the middle school and the high school cap. It had been 500 for the high school cap and 600, it's just confusing. So I'm recommending we just have the $600 cap because you usually have kids in which cap are you using then? Like, it was just a silly kind of misalignment. So $600 is a standard cap, maintaining the $200 for the athletic and fine arts experiences, and then lowering the intramurals from 100 to 75 at the high school. And then at the Gibbons, lowering the activity fee from 150 to 100, which is a much more in-scope amount for the range of how long they run and what they're doing. I mean, those are they're very popular. They're more substantive in terms of kind of what's going on with them. And, I spent a lot of time talking with Johanna and Jack about it, and we feel like the 100 makes sense. And we've been charging the 150 for a long time, so it's a substantial break to lower it down to 100. And then standardizing the club activities at kind of a $50 rate, which just feels like a much more kind of comfortable general fee for the flexibility of what goes on with clubs. I believe then as well that we should not be changing it year over year because it's complicated to retrain everybody and it just adds questions. So I would recommend this stand for 3 years and then you kind of reassess, how it's working. And if you scroll down, I think that's the bottom. Yeah. So it's a pretty tight report, and the goal was to give you a snapshot, and I think, Lisa had made the recommendation to get a little more detail. I think it's a good one to see kind of a summation of how the finances are working for us, and then the recommendation on the fees. And then if you, it would be nice to get this completed because we post this, we have to start organizing, I can bring it back to the stipend committee. That's stable. They don't really get into the finances. That's not them. That's a separate arm. It's run through you and me, and that's different than what they decide to do with the amount of stipends for people. That's what they manage, and the people side of that whole, arm of the work. This is, in general, yours and my recommendation for the implementation of the fee and the fee structure, and then we run that through the business office.
So I thank you for the details, because I think, and I think I requested it a year ago when we were reviewing, so I appreciate that you even remembered that I really was looking for this information for our committee to really review. So it's really very detailed, and I feel like it answers a lot of the questions that I had about which part is coming from what, and it helps. So do we have, and the recommendations seem very much in tune with the parent feedback we received in the last, has it been 4 years? I think it's been, whatever it's been.
It's really been 3 with almost 4, but almost 4, but 2 years of COVID impact, where we really kind of restabilized the collection of fees for clubs.
Yeah.
And it lifted a discussion that I think let us clarify practice. So I think it's in much better alignment.
Yeah, so it answers people's questions about the differential between high school versus middle school and athletics versus club, fine arts versus club, those types of things. So do we have a motion to approve? Oh, I'm so sorry. Questions?
That's all right. So I see Robert's not there today. That's all right. I should be sitting there. No worries. So for why is there a way we can look at the abundance of companies that are there in our community, like robotics? When I see that Amazon is doing an awesome job, their whole robotics center is in Westborough.
Yeah.
So we could have some kind of a seek out some kind of a help from them, whether it's parts, supplies, and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure they have a ton of.
Yeah, no, we
that they're not
definitely
using.
do, and we've got some plans. You want to be strategic in that, and so we did substantial fundraising when we did the fields. We always have an arm of kind of quiet fundraising for smaller amounts. I think we've brought in like 34,000 this year in varied donations and fundraising. We've always done an arm of fundraising for the borough program. So we do as well. And then we come in with a strategic ask, and you have 2 things in your strategic plan, which you've approved. One is the development of the greenhouse and the interior courtyard at Gibbons, and an initiative to really develop that green work. I'd like to go to Amazon and really approach them and work with them to see if they will help us with that project, and then also see Gibbons as maybe like a sister school for them and pick up our, support of the robotics teams as well with Redshift. And then Redshift has been supporting the development of a very active middle school team with leadership from the upper high school coming down and coordinating. So yeah, I think we definitely kind of have a picture of that hope, and we don't have a separate fundraising branch. I just want to be clear. But we do, when we have targeted needs, really go after it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to go after targeted companies and say, your expertise is here, why can't you help us?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I'll take you with me.
Good question. Good question, Margot.
Then I just wanted to be clear with anyone watching that there's also assistance available for anyone who wants to participate in athletics or clubs and feels that the fee is too high. So just so everyone knows, we offer that.
Definitely, and we actually actively, I think on the ground, are always recruiting students who need to be plugged into activities, supporting families, and our principals and faculty are very active around making sure that those invitations are wide open and being clear with students that, the cost wouldn't be prohibitive and could be mitigated or eliminated. And I think we see, an appropriate range of participation.
Yeah, thank you.
So, any others? Okay, so do we have a motion to implement the 500 yearly payment for a club or activity during its first 2 years, et cetera, and then the fee recommendations for FY23 that Amber stated, and the fee structure being reviewed every 3 years to determine adjustments as needed?
So move.
Second.
Second. And any discussion that we haven't had? All in favor? I see a vote of 5-0 with 5 being present. And thank you, Amber, and we'll look forward to that other report in May. I think, Steve Batchelor, you'll find it quite interesting looking at the review of significant number of clubs. I mean, I think what is so interesting about this is that, one, that it is an extensive list of clubs offered at middle school and high school, allowing our students to discover and explore new interests, get involved with community service and several other volunteer opportunities, as well as expanding themselves beyond the scope of academics that, is required of them on a daily basis. So it really creates a balance in these kids' lives. And so I want to just make sure, if you're listening, you could look up the clubs on the website, on middle school website and the high school, to see there is a host of societal interests. And so students really embrace these, and most students are involved in a lot of these activities. And if your kid is not, it would be helpful for you to encourage them to, join. So we're going to move on to our committee and negotiation assignments. We reviewed these. We actually approved and voted in a bunch of subcommittees, but what we hadn't done was our negotiating assignments for contracts. So we're going to look at that now and go through them. I think Daniel has it up. So I guess we'll just start in order. We're going to scroll to the bottom where the negotiating teams are, right there. Yep. A little down.
Down.
There they are. Okay. So we'll start with the administrators. Kristen and Daniel, in the past, are we good to maintain that? It seemed like a good team.
Good team.
Good team. Okay, moving right along. I should mention that last year, 3 years ago, in the contract for cafeteria workers, the name was changed to food service workers. So we should change that name. And we've lost a couple members of that team, so I was going to suggest that Dave and potentially Tammy and myself were on the food service workers team. And with that, moving on to the custodians, similarly, we lost a member, and I was going to suggest for custodians, am I in the right spot? That it would be on myself and Dave and maybe Tammy for that one as well.
Yep.
Is that okay with you, Dave?
Yep.
Okay. Any objections so far? Okay, moving on, the paraeducators. Remember, just a reminder that Sarah was on this, but I think whoever's on paraeducators should also be on the teachers. So if we look at that, Stevie, do you want to still be on that? You seem like a good fit for paraeducators and teachers.
Sure.
And Amber, and then to add Dave to that team
Yep.
of both. And I think I was thinking that Kristen could join those two teams as well, just because she's had a lot of experience in these areas. So is that okay with everyone so far? Okay, well, moving right along. Secretaries, Raghu, you were on that team before, and Amber. And I was thinking maybe we would add Dave to the secretaries as well. Does that seem, oh, excuse me. That also should be changed to administrative assistant. Oh, it does. It says it.
Someone, it's a live document,
There we go,
apparently.
just helping us out.
It's a live document, it's changing like magic.
Okay, administrative assistants, good to get the correct wording there. Okay, so that'll be Raghu, Amber, and now Dave. Okay, everyone okay with this so far?
Yep.
Then we come to tutors, that was Kristen, but perhaps this is the one where Steve Batchelor gets added to tutors, and Kristen comes off that one. Sure. And then Daniel, you feeling okay about tutors, staying on the team?
Sure.
Daniel, are you on a lot of teams that you had that look, but too many?
No. I would love to do it, and then we'll get to know each other, which is Steve and I will,
Okay.
yeah, it'd be
They're a
great.
good group.
So I think that brings us to, is that all of our teams?
So I'm just changing them now. I thought Daniel was going to, but he didn't, so I'm going in and changing them right now. Just while we're getting a lot done here.
Well, we
So-
can, while you're doing that, we can move right on to safe routes to school.
Right, you can do that. Did I get them all? So let's just read through them one more
Yeah, I'll
time.
review them. So administrators, we have Kristen, Daniel.
Yep.
Then we have food service workers, that's Lisa, Dave, and Tammy.
She's gonna change it now.
Okay.
Okay.
And then we have custodians, and that'll be Lisa, Dave, and Tammy.
Whoops, hold on.
And then paraeducators, we have Steve, Jarrett, Amber, and Kristen. Okay, and then administrative assistants, we have Raghu, Amber, and Dave. Okay, and then tutors, we have Kristen, Steve, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have Kristen. Changing that to Steve Batchelor and Daniel. And then finally, the teachers unit, we have Kristen, Steve Jarrett, Amber, and Dave.
All right. I think I
Okay.
got 'em. Thank you.
Great.
That's fun.
Well, yeah, I think we should go for the motion where we put all of them in, including the next subcommittee, which would be safe routes to school. Now, in the past, Sarah was our representative on that, and we would love you to be on that, Steve Batchelor. You feel okay about that?
Happy to do it.
Okay, and so we never called it a subcommittee, but I think we should add it as a subcommittee above to the list.
Yeah, it's become an important part of our work.
Yeah, Sarah did a lot of work. So they are big shoes to fill, but I know we're real confident that you can do this. Taking on
Well,
the
it's kind of nice
baton.
because you live in that neighborhood too, like where we're focusing our first effort, so I feel like that's a
Daniel,
good.
I'm doing a good job here. Are you impressed? For safe routes to school.
So, do we have a motion to approve the negotiating teams that we just discussed and mentioned, and the Safe Routes to School Subcommittee?
I'll move.
To approve that? Thank you, Raghu. Do we have a second?
Second.
So Steve Jarrett. And is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor? See 5-0 in favor, 5 being present. And we are ready for adjournment. The next meeting of the school committee is scheduled for Wednesday, April 13th, 2022. Want to thank Westborough TV again. Motion to adjourn.
Alma.
Raghu, and a second.
Second.
We have Steve Durrett, and all in favor? 5-0, 0 opposed, 5 being present, and meeting is adjourned.